You know, when you hear the name Nina Simone, you probably think legendary singer, right? The High Priestess of Soul. But honestly, that title barely scratches the surface. We're about to explore how a classically trained pianist, whose biggest dream was denied, completely transformed her art into one of the most powerful weapons of the civil rights movement.
So picture this. She's standing on stage at Carnegie Hall, and she says this right before launching into a song that would absolutely shock the nation. It's a quote that just perfectly captures her genius, doesn't it? She was creating art for a future that hadn't even arrived yet. And to really understand the song, we have to understand the artist.
Because you see, before Nina Simone the activist even existed, her life was shaped by a single massive heartbreak. That legendary rage she was known for, it didn't just come from nowhere. It was born from a dream that was stolen right out from under her.
Before she was the Nina we know, she was Eunice Wayman, a true child prodigy from North Carolina. I mean, she was so unbelievably brilliant that her entire community pitched in to create a fund just to support her classical music education. In everyone's mind, her destiny was the concert hall stage, and the very last step, getting into the super prestigious Curtis Institute of Music.
But she was rejected. And for the rest of her life, Nina Simone was absolutely convinced there was only one reason why, because she was black. That single moment didn't just change her life. It basically rerouted the entire history of American music.
And this really shows you the incredible divide that opened up in her life. On one side, you have Eunice Wayman, who dreamed of playing Bach in grand concert halls. But on the other, out of sheer necessity, you get Nina Simone, a whole new persona she created just so she could play jazz and blues in nightclubs. It was work she actually had to hide from her deeply religious mother. The dream was gone, and a new, harsh reality took its place.
So this is how she starts her early career. She becomes the High Priestess of Soul, this regal, almost intimidating performer. And even back then, before the really explicit protest songs, you can see the seeds of rebellion were already being planted.
Her style was just completely one of a kind. She would weave her classical training into gospel and jazz, dropping these complex fugues and counterpoints where, a simple blues progression would have been fine. She was already famous for her intensity. But what's really fascinating is who she was hanging out with in New York. Writers and deep thinkers like James Baldwin and Lorraine Hansberry, who really started to sharpen her political consciousness.
In her protest, it actually started with language. She absolutely hated being called a jazz singer. She felt it was just a box that people used to pigeonhole black artists and totally ignore their technical skill. So she came up with her own term, black classical music. She was demanding respect for her art on her own terms.
But then came the year that changed absolutely everything. The year all that simmering tension in America finally boiled over. And along with it, Nina Simone's quiet rebellion just erupted into a full-throated roar.
1963. This was it. This was the point of no return for the country and for Nina Simone.
It was two events, just a few months apart, that lit the fuse. First, the murder of Medgar Evers in his own driveway. And then, the absolutely horrific bombing of a church in Birmingham that killed 4 little girls, Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Carol Denise McNair.
Hearing about that bombing just broke something inside of her. She said later that her first instinct wasn't to sit down and write a song. No, it was to build a weapon. Her grief was so huge it turned into this white-hot fury, a real desire for violent revenge.
But her husband, Andrew Stroud, stopped her. He told her, "Nina, you can't kill anyone. You're a musician. Do what you do." And that was a pivotal command. He refocused all of that rage away from violence and channeled it right back into the one place where she had total, absolute control, her music.
And what she did in less than an hour was compose an anthem, a song that will get banned and celebrated in equal measure, a song that drew a permanent line in the sand for protest music.
All of that pain, all of that anger, all that grief for those 4 little girls, she just poured it all out at the piano. And the result was Mississippi Goddam, a song written at the speed of rage.
So how exactly does this song work as a protest anthem? Well, first, the music is shockingly upbeat, like something from a Broadway show. This crazy musical irony makes the brutal lyrics feel even more jarring. Second, she names names. Alabama, Mississippi. There are no metaphors here, just raw, unfiltered truth. And third, she directly attacks that whole idea of going slow, that polite suggestion from some liberals to just be patient. And this line right here, this is the heart of the whole political argument. She's saying this isn't about being liked. It's not about being neighbors. This is about fundamental, non-negotiable human rights, period. She completely changed the terms of the debate.
But her activism didn't just stop with Mississippi Goddam. Not at all. She kept evolving, tackling subjects that were so complex and so far ahead of their time that a lot of people just weren't ready to hear them yet.
3 years later, she released 4 Women. Now, today, we'd call it a masterclass in intersectionality, but that term didn't even exist back then. What she was doing was telling the story of the deep psychological trauma inflicted on Black women over generations.
The song introduces us to 4 different archetypes. You've got Aunt Sarah, who represents the endurance and pain of slavery. Then there's Sophronia, the product of rape, who's stuck living between 2 worlds. You have Sweet Thing, who's been reduced to nothing more than her sexuality. And finally, there's Peaches, hardened, bitter, and filled with the righteous rage of the modern civil rights era.
And the way she just screams that last name. My name is Peaches? Wow, that's not just a lyric. That is the literal sound of the rising Black Power movement. It's a declaration of identity, of anger, and a total refusal to be silenced for one more second.
So it's probably no surprise that the song was banned all over the country. The establishment called it insulting. But the real truth, it was threatening. It was threatening because it laid bare the deep internal wounds of racism and colorism, and those were topics America was desperate to ignore.
So, all of this leaves us with a pretty powerful question, don't you think? Nina Simone found her true voice in her rage and in her activism. Sure, it probably cost her commercial success, it got her records banned from the radio, but it cemented her legacy forever. Which really makes you wonder, when an artist truly finds their voice, who or what are they obligated to speak for? Themselves, their community, or the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be?